Moving to Northern Michigan could be the best decision you ever make, or it can be a total mistake. Before you buy that lakefront home and pack up your snow boots, you need to hear the real pros and cons on living in Northern Michigan. So take it from somebody who has lived here their entire life. My name is Gino D'Angelo. I'm a local Northern Michigan real estate agent, and I've helped hundreds of family move in and out of Northern Michigan. Some people who have relocated here absolutely love it, and others have absolutely hated it. So stick around, because by the end of this video, you're gonna have a better idea of exactly where you stand. The first pro of living in Northern Michigan is the year-round activities and the natural beauty. Let's start with the obvious, the scenery. We're talking about pristine lakes like Burt Lake, Lake Charlevoix, or Walloon. And not to mention the incredible outdoor activities that are available year-round. We've got boating in the summer, skiing in the winter, hiking in the fall, and even fishing in the spring. If you love the outdoors, you're gonna love living in Northern Michigan. In fact, I recently spoke with somebody who we helped relocate to Northern Michigan, and they could not stop talking about how nice it was to have their boat on the dock in their backyard. Prior to relocating to Northern Michigan, they lived in Metro Detroit and had to haul their boat all the way up north and then deal with the hassle of putting it in and taking it out of the water every time they wanted to use it. Now, they just open their back door, take 20 steps, turn the key, and they are ready to take their boat all over the lake. Another pro to living in Northern Michigan is just the quality of life. One of the biggest draws to Northern Michigan is the quality of life it affords. Northern Michigan is made up of a bunch of small towns like Petoskey, Harbor Springs, Boyne City, Gaylord, and Traverse City. Places where you can actually slow down, breathe, and enjoy life. There's less traffic, more community, and you're never too far from a lake or a trail. In fact, I was recently standing in line at North Perk waiting to get my morning cup of black coffee, and I overheard two people having a conversation, and one of them remarked at how long it was taking to get to the front of the line, and the other reminded them that that is just one of the trade-offs of living in Northern Michigan. Things just take a little bit longer here. The third pro to living in Northern Michigan is the real estate opportunity, both the different types of real estate available in Northern Michigan and also the price of real estate in Northern Michigan. Let's start with the prices. Of course, we're constantly talking about how expensive Northern Michigan has gotten, specifically in the last 5 years. However, if you compare Northern Michigan real estate prices to other coastal towns or other areas with a high quality of life, Northern Michigan is still affordable, believe it or not. And I think that is one of the major reasons we have seen such a boom in Northern Michigan. I was having a conversation with a client the other day, and we were talking about how much more accessible Northern Michigan is than it once was. And what I mean by that was early on in my career, 10, 15, 20 years ago, we largely pulled our buyers from nearby states such as Ohio, Indiana, or even Illinois. Now, with the expansion of the Traverse City Airport and Northern Michigan getting more national news coverage, we're pulling buyers from much further away. In fact, my guess is if you're watching this video, you don't live in one of the nearby states. Drop a comment below and let me know what state you're coming in from today. Recently, we've seen a surge in people buying from California, Florida, and even Washington. In fact, I'm working with a couple from Seattle right now. And if you told me 10 years ago that we would be drawing buyers from those faraway places, I would have thought you were crazy. And when talking about real estate in Northern Michigan, it's not just a pricing conversation. It's also a lifestyle. One of the things that I personally think makes Northern Michigan special is just how many different types of lifestyles are available in Northern Michigan. Within a 5-minute radius, you can find a $5 million house on Lake Charlevoix and an $80,000 cabin in the woods. I think that diversity truly makes Northern Michigan special. I often look at my listing sheet or my list of pendings, and the types of properties are all over the board, both from really expensive to really affordable, from cabins in the woods to houses on the water, to condos, to everything in between. Another pro to living in Northern Michigan is every one of these small towns has its own unique charm. From the mushroom houses in Charlevoix to the Alpine themed downtown in Gaylord, it seems like every town in Northern Michigan has its own distinct personality, and I think that grouped together truly makes Northern Michigan special. It's not even the style of towns necessarily that makes them unique, it's also the activities. Whether it's the Venetian Festival every summer in Charlevoix, or the downtown open house in Petoskey, or the Santa Parade in Boyne City, each town has their signature activity that everyone looks forward to. And what typically happens happens is everybody from the surrounding areas funnels into that specific town for that specific activity. In fact, I was just at the Venetian Festival in Charlevoix and saw friends from both Gaylord and Harbor Springs. The final pro we're going to talk about today in terms of living in Northern Michigan is an obvious one. For as long as I can remember, and probably even before that, people have always chose to retire in Northern Michigan. Before remote work, there was seasonal and full-time retirees coming to Northern Michigan. We have great hospitals, a vibrant social scene, and a couple of other amenities that have made Northern Michigan a retirement destination. Now that we've discussed the pros of living in Northern Michigan, let's talk about the cons. And you're gonna wanna stick around for the last one because it may surprise you. The number one con when living in Northern Michigan full-time is the harsh winters. Because let's be real, the winters here are no joke, specifically the one we just came out of. When you look at places in the snow belt like Gaylord or Kalkaska, they get record-breaking amounts of snow every year. Now, I've come to love winter in Northern Michigan. I love the slower pace of life. I love watching it snow, and I love skiing and snowboarding at Boyne Highlands. But if you're not used to the winter and not used to the additional work that comes with winter, then you may be in for a harsh reality. A couple of things to consider when relocating to Northern Michigan, specifically if you're going to be here in the winter months, is having the right vehicle to handle the icy snows and budgeting for higher heating costs, and also figuring out how you're going to get rid of all the snow in your driveway. I feel specifically sorry for anyone who's recently relocated to Northern Michigan and this winter being their first winter because it was a doozy. We had record snowfalls in a lot of areas and a once-in-a-lifetime ice storm. The second con to consider is we have a limited job market in Northern Michigan. Unless you're in tourism, healthcare, or work remotely, finding a job in Northern Michigan could be a challenge. A lot of the businesses here are seasonal and the wages can reflect that. In fact, many people that are relocating to Northern Michigan are either bringing a job with them or starting a business once they get here. In fact, that is one of the first questions I ask when I'm talking to somebody about relocating to Northern Michigan. Where are you going to work and what is your plan to find a job here? It's heartbreaking, but I can't tell you how many times I've received calls from excited people who are relocating to Northern Michigan because they found a job only to find out that job doesn't support what it costs to live in Northern Michigan. Another con to consider when living in Northern Michigan is the issues that come with rural connectivity. What I mean about rural connectivity is while there are some great small towns in Northern Michigan, once you get outside of those small towns, it gets very rural very quickly. Unless you're in Traverse City, you're not gonna have a Costco or a Target nearby. And if that is something you become accustomed to, you're definitely going to have to reconsider living in Northern Michigan. There's nothing worse than having to make a long drive in the winter because you have people coming over for dinner and what you need is only available at Costco. Now, since I've lived here, living in Northern Michigan has become a lot less inconvenient, which I think is another reason people are choosing to relocate here. With things like Amazon and fast shipping from other online retailers, mixed with way more Wi-Fi internet coverage than we've had in the past, Northern Michigan is a little less inconvenient and a little bit more enjoyable, even if you're used to the creature comforts. Another con is the population swing. It feels like in Northern Michigan, we are often swinging between super busy summers and super quiet winters. Now, with a lot of people relocating here full time, that has evened out a little bit, but it is still way busier in the summer than it is in the winter. And I've had a lot of people who weren't from here that relocated to Northern Michigan tell me that takes a little bit of getting used to. It seems like the flip switches on Labor Day and it goes from crazy busy to crazy slow almost overnight. Now, the fifth con is while a lot of people choose to retire in Northern Michigan, it does have its trade-offs. Retiring here can be incredible, but it also comes with a few challenges. The winters can be tough if you're not used to them, and access to specialized healthcare often means you're going to be traveling a long ways away. You're going to find yourself going to larger cities like Traverse City or even Detroit or Grand Rapids to find specialists. In fact, I've helped a lot of people relocate to Northern Michigan for retirement, but they only spend part of the year here. They're what we call snowbirds, which means they spend the best part of the season in Northern Michigan, and then once the weather changes, they head to warmer climates like Florida, Texas, or Arizona. If you ask me, that is the perfect lifestyle. So there you have it, the real pros and cons of living in Northern Michigan. It's an incredible place if you embrace the seasons, the lifestyle, and everything that comes with it. But it's not for everyone. If you're considering relocating to Northern Michigan, whether it's for a vacation home or to live here full time, I would love to be your real estate resource of choice. I've been selling real estate in Northern Michigan for 22 years, and I've helped literally hundreds of families move in and out of Northern Michigan, and I'd love to do the same for you. And if you found this video helpful, make sure you hit the subscribe button. That way you never miss one of our videos. See you on the next one.